Hello, I'm Dr. Brad Musil, and this is a reading from The Utility of Religion, Mill, Nietzsche, and James. This will be part 4, conclusion of chapter 1, John Stuart Mill and Utility of Religion. Again, this is part 4, conclusion. I would now like to briefly summarize my conclusions regarding the arguments Mill advances, and outline a couple of concerns I have regarding his overall analysis. I find it hard to find fault with most of the arguments presented in Utility of Religion, and I've alluded to the few instances in which I do. My few worries included 1. His very general conception of religion, 2. His minimization of the nefarious forms of religion, 3. His notion that instances of these nefarious forms are on the decline, and 4. The historical debt of moral gratitude he pays to religion. In general, however, I believe Mill makes a very compelling case against the thesis that religion is morally advantageous, and for considering that it may even be disadvantageous. For one thing, he undermines the case for religion as an enforcer of morality. On the one hand, if appeal to supernatural consequences is made, the motivation of believers behaving morally seems suspect and possibly even immoral. On the other hand, even if such an appeal is not made, Mill gives us good reason to believe that religion is not necessary nor preferable for affecting moral behavior. I concur with Mill and propose that other worldly deterrents embedded in our society, for example, prison and social disgrace, some of which Mill alludes to, seem just as successful, and arguably more so, at curbing immoral behavior as religious belief does. Also bear in mind Mill's point about how the remoteness and the quote, unavoidable uncertainty of religious penalties makes them feeble as a deterring motive, end quote. Footnote 203 cites the source. Along these lines, worldly consequences are likely more influential on human behavior precisely because they are more tangible and certain. We may have hell to pay should we commit ourselves to a life of crime, but we will almost certainly end up paying with years of our lives behind bars. As Philalethes from Schopenhauer's dialogue suggests, quote, if a man feels tempted to commit a crime, you may rely upon it that the first consideration which enters his head is the penalty appointed for it, and the chances that it will fall upon him. Then comes, as a second consideration, the risk to his reputation. He will ruminate by the hour on these two impediments, before he ever takes a thought of religious considerations. End quote. Footnote 204 cites the source. Furthermore, Mill makes a compelling case against the moral merits of religion as a teacher of morality, citing the fact that disparate religions offer different and at times conflicting moral recommendations, and that there are examples of immorality associated with these religions. Add to Mill's arguments the empirical evidence calling into question the positive influence of religion on morality, and I can't help but conclude that there's little reason to think that religion is morally advantageous. I also tend to agree with the points Mill makes regarding the individual utility of religion. In my mind, there is a much better case to be made for religion's individual utility than there is for its social utility, which is reflected by Mill in his initial concession that religion does, in fact, make some people happy. Reflecting on the why that underlies our existence is something we have all experienced, and it is likely something we have all yearned to answer at one point or another. Religion gives some people peace of mind regarding this existential anxiety that is so familiar to us all. However, I believe Mill is correct in suggesting that we nevertheless need to ask whether supernatural religious belief is necessary and or optimal for such satisfaction. Moreover, in contrast to what Matz argues in Mill's own later views, I agree with the answers Mill provides to these questions in Utility of Religion. Supernatural religious belief seems neither necessary nor optimal for satisfying our psychological desires and making us happy. Once again, consider the examples of societies that have flourished without a preponderance of supernatural belief, and the examples of other alternatives for satisfying the existential desires in question, e.g., patriotism and Mill's religion of humanity. In light of these considerations, supernatural religious belief does not seem necessary for the kind of personal satisfaction in question. Moreover, the self-interested nature of moral behavior associated with supernatural consequences and the substantial intellectual difficulties cited in Section C of Part 3 gives us good reason to believe that other alternatives may be more optimal for our individual pursuit of happiness than supernatural religions. While I find much of what Mill argues in Utility of Religion convincing, I do have a few concerns about his overall analysis. To begin with, Mill does not consider the benefit of religious belief for the physical health of individuals. In fairness to Mill, this isn't likely something he would have had reason to consider during his lifetime, since he wasn't familiar with empirical research available today that suggests it, and thus it doesn't suggest any fault on his part. Nonetheless, some research since Mill's time has indicated that religion is beneficial for the physical health of individuals. Kevin S. Siebold and Peter C. Hill offer a nice review of the relevant research in their article, The Role of Religion and Spirituality in Mental and Physical Health. Footnote 205 cites the source. Wherein they suggest that, quote, studies on the influence of religion on physical health suggest that religion usually, but not always, plays a positive role, end quote. Footnote 206 cites the source, and conclude that the influence of religion and spirituality is generally a positive one. Footnote 207 cites the source. Similarly, Harold G. Koenig examined the effects of religiosity on patients diagnosed with either congestive heart failure or chronic pulmonary disease, and most of his findings suggested an inverse relationship between religiosity and mental and physical health problems. Footnote 208 cites the source. While Mill acknowledges the psychological or mental benefits associated with religion, he never mentions the possibility of physical health benefits for individuals. In his work, Richard Dawkins, a well-known atheist and Darwinian scientist, endorses an evolutionary explanation of the widespread nature and survival of religious belief, and in the process he surveys the candidates for such an explanation, one of which is an appeal to the benefits religion offers for the physical health of believers. While he thinks that some of the benefits discussed by Mill, such as the notion that religion satisfies our existential curiosity and offers a sense of atonement for the suffering we experience on earth, quote, miss the point of Darwinian explanations altogether, end quote. Footnote 209 cites the source. Footnote 210. I must say that I have my doubts about whether Dawkins is right about this, and I'm not really sure why he says it here. In the next chapter, I will make the case that psychological or mental health can significantly influence physical health and more generally one's prospects for survival. So again, he's saying that these sort of suggestions miss the point of Darwinian explanations altogether, end quote. He suggests that a Darwinian can provide the kind of explanation in question by appealing to the improved physical health that religion is thought to offer in individuals. Accordingly, in discussing the, quote, evidence that religious belief protects people from stress-related diseases, end quote, he suggests that it, quote, would not be at all surprising, end quote, if this turned out to be true, given that, quote, dummy pills with no pharmacological activity at all demonstrably improve health, end quote. Footnote 211 cites the source. He argues that religion offers a kind of placebo effect, whereby believers, regardless of whether they're actually in possession of true beliefs regarding matters of ultimate concern, think they are in possession of such beliefs and thus experience all the positive benefits associated with thinking one in possession of such truth. Footnote 212. Dawkins, however, argues that such an explanation ultimately falls short as a valid evolutionary interpretation, insofar as he finds this, quote, placebo theory too meager to account for the massive and all-pervasive phenomenon of religion, end quote. And I cite the source there. End of footnote 212. Hence, even some who are atheists and generally skeptical of the utility of religion have conceded that religious belief seems to offer physical health benefits to individuals. To be sure, there are those who remain unconvinced that this is in fact true, and Dawkins is right when he suggests that, quote, the theory, i.e. that, quote, religion is a medical placebo, end quote, that prolongs life by reducing stress, end quote, is going to have to run the gauntlet of skeptics who point out the many circumstances in which religion increases stress rather than decreases it, end quote. Footnote 213 cites the source. Still, many people will judge their physical health as being of utmost importance to them. That is, it is something highly valued by many people, in which case, omitting it from consideration is no small matter. All of this goes to show that this is an important and significant aspect of individual utility, and it is an aspect that Mill does not seem to consider in his own analysis of religion's individual utility. Finally, granting as Mill suggests that there are other more optimal ways to generate the kind of personal satisfaction and happiness religion produces, I am not convinced that these alternatives are realistic options for everyone. While I do believe patriotism and Mill's own religion of humanity will work for some people, and that Mill may be right to suggest that they are optimal, I still wonder whether others might require supernatural views. In Chapter 3, we will see that James makes the case that some individuals are so overburdened by earthly evils that supernatural religion becomes necessary for their salvation. If this is the case, Mill's alternatives will prove to be insufficient for the happiness of some individuals, and religion would appear to warrant more credit in terms of individual utility than he gives it. However, whether religion is indeed essential for the flourishing of some individuals, as James suggests, remains to be seen, and there are those who emphasize instead religion's corruptive influence on the welfare of individuals. Nietzsche, to whom we turn in the next chapter, does this, asserting that religion spawns self-deception and poor health in individuals. Nietzsche would likely submit that, Instead of addressing the source of the problem James alludes to, i.e. our suffering here on earth, supernatural religion merely encourages us to turn away from it. Alternatively, Nietzsche recommends that we address the problem of earthly suffering head on and seek to understand it better, not that we turn away from it. For Nietzsche, what's at the heart of this earthly suffering and also underlies supernatural religions is the problem of nihilism, which for him reflects the devaluation of earthly life that is implicit in these supernatural views. In the following chapter, I examine Nietzsche's The Antichrist and offer a more detailed analysis of how this problem of nihilism affects considerations of the individual utility of religion. So again, that was conclusion of chapter 1, John Stuart Mill and Utility of Religion, from The Utility of Religion, Mill, Nietzsche, and James. Thanks.